All right, joining me for this very special episode from Islamabad is Ali Chishti, who is a regional expert as well as an OSINT guy, and he wears a lot of hats. So Ali, give us a quick bio of yourself.
So I worked with military.com as a contributor. That's how we got to know each other. I write. I've been writing for over 20 years on defense, counterterrorism, and aviation. My expertise lies in Indo-Pakistan conflict, Al Qaeda, and counterterrorism.
So I like to use the term deep intel on my episodes. Sometimes it's tongue in cheek, but in this case, it is not. Let's start by this Pakistani military debrief that aired a few days ago. It's made the rounds, but I want to just use that as a scene setter. So who is it that is giving this brief, Ali?
So Pakistan military brief actually is an inter-services brief. What the person who is actually explaining on the board is Air Vice Marshal Aurangzeb. So he's giving out the brief from the Air Force side.
Okay, so we'll watch it and maybe we'll stop it during as it's going on or just talk over it. And then we'll do some analysis on the backside of it. But I just want to run this as sort of a scene setter. So here we go.
Fighters started an initial build-up that was picked up from the north and the center across IB at 0010 hours. And by that time, PAF had initiated its response within 2 minutes. By 0012, our response was activated. The IF started to get their fighters get airborne in large numbers. By the time it has come to 12:30, we were pretty sure that this is going to be the day and the time to knock some sense into these guys once again. So we commenced our multi-domain operations, the pride and joy and the new concept of war that we have. This is the picture that's getting jumbled up. We have huge number of IF fighters that are stacked up in azimuth and in vertical all across, and the PF DCA response is in position. The complete package, when it gets into shape, it is on 4 axes, and we perceive that they will have 4 incisions just to embroil. Up to 60 aircraft, including 14 Rafales, were electronically ID'd by all through our electromagnetic operational environment. We call it the EMO. So by the time they were in air, we had sorted out and contracted.
Okay, so 2 Top Gun BVR terms used there, sorted and contracted. Does my BVR timeline heart good to hear those words, right? So sorted means between the airplanes, and you can see the air orders of battle there. It is a gigantic amount of airplanes on both sides airborne. And as the Air Marshal said, up to 60 airplanes on the Indian side electronically ID'd. Sorted means, okay, this is what I'm showing on my radar picture, I concur. And then contracted, during the brief, you would say, okay, I'll take everybody north, you take everybody south, or we'll sort range-wise. So not a whole lot of chatter on the radio. This is what's beautiful about a well-disciplined air war. So he uses those 2 terms.
The 60 number, that augmented to 72 through their scrambles that kept on coming just to reinforce and supplement and to saturate the air defense. They thought they could do that for the Pakistani ADGE, Air Defense Ground Environment. The complete DCA package response by Pakistani side was also there. We had 42 high-tech aircraft on our side.
Okay, so DCA, defensive counter-air.
And the strategy was to have force concentration in our selected AOR and fight at our own strength. PF fighters ensured Pakistan's air sovereignty, and because of that, we first rerouted all civilian traffic that was about to go from Lahore, Islamabad, and this area, because we thought that this is going to be the hot plate. So we wanted safety for all the civil airliners. When they had seen this kind of a strong defense on our side, they resorted to launching their air-to-ground weapons while being cis-frontier. And as soon as they had launched the weapons, we could ID that instantly. And the Chief of the Air Staff, as I mentioned, he was in the COC. He has been there for a couple of nights. I have seen him there. So when I said that he spearheaded and he led from the front, he really did that. And he changed the contract. We were given the rules of engagement first to deter. And as soon as this thing happened, we changed our rules of the game in the air. From deter to assure kill, deny own loss.
So that's pretty huge. The ROE changes while they're airborne, directed by the chief of staff. That's pretty varsity stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
PF strategy changed. We had a plan. We thought that Indians, the last time they said that they would have Rafales and they could have created any difference. So we targeted their center of gravity and the Rafales. That's why you see good numbers for that. We would have had more numbers, but we showed restraint. Ladies and gentlemen, the thing about this whole playtime was this thing lasted for more than an hour. With so many large number of aircraft, so many large number of aircraft on both sides, with so many grinds, and the flow of the BVR, the modern warfare has changed so much that the long stick, the employment is if you don't shoot, you get shot. So that is why the art was to employ them optimally, and that was a big challenge for us. That is why I say that it has never happened before. These are the locations with the range bearing, electronic ID that we think that we are sure that we have shot. A MiG-29 was shot 8 miles from LOC, bearing 24320 nautical miles from Srinagar. A Su-30 was shot 192, 19 miles, 25 miles from LOC. We have the exact details because you cannot, in the modern battlefield, you cannot conjure up things out of imagination.
So your thoughts, Ali?
Oh God, man! This was a very professional briefing to start with. Apparently, so what really happened? You've witnessed one of its. I think after World War II, this was the biggest. It's not a dogfight because we talk about BVR, beyond visual range wars now. So both Air Force kept within the borders. And apparently it was reported up to 125 airplanes were from both sides were engaging each other in about 350 miles radius. It was amazing. And apparently what you've seen is Pakistani Air Force commander actually giving out exact coordinates of how Pakistani Air Force retaliated to Indian attacks. And what we know now is that about 6 aircraft plus one male UAV was shot down by the Pakistani Air Force. That includes 3 Rafales. And apparently that was the pride and joy of Indian Air Force.
So specifically, we're talking about, like you said, 3 Rafales, a Mirage 2000, a Russian Su-30 MKI, which is the export variant, and a Russian MiG-29, and as you said, some Israeli-supplied Heron surveillance drones and some other killer drones. So, just that was the box score with the Pakistani kill side, which the Air Marshal outlined. Reporting on current events like the recent tensions between India and Pakistan is challenging because the situation is very fluid and chaotic at times. So let me tell you about a resource that I depend on as I attempt to provide an unbiased point of view: Ground News. I start my day by going to the Ground News homepage, and here on the left side we see the topic we're dealing with in this episode. We click on it, and you can see there are 17 stories around that topic with a summary that frames it nicely if you're in a hurry. If we click on View All Sources, it drives us to this page. Again, there's a summary of the issue at the top. Over on the right, we see a bias distribution infographic with the logos of the outlets prominently displayed. Let's compare 2 headlines. First one is from the Japan Times, which is owned by News2You Holdings, Inc., has high factuality and center bias. We click through to the story with the headline, China gave Pakistan satellite support, India Defense Group says, and see the coverage as matter of fact as the bias rating suggests it would be. And then we have this one here from Outlook India, owned by Rajan Rahija, with very high factuality and leans left. The headline is more direct than the previous article. China provided Pakistan satellite support, report, and the coverage is notably more direct, with the charge that China did more than simply supply arms to Pakistan. You can't get this amount of information organized like this anywhere else. Go to ground.news/Ward or scan the QR code on the screen. If you use my link, you can get 40% off unlimited access, which is the Vantage plan that I use. Again, that's ground.news/Ward or scan the QR code. The link is in the episode description below, so check it out.
What I know, and from speaking to the Air Force guys, and not just here but to the Indian side as well, because I've reported on both sides, is that the Pakistanis kept radio silence during the time, and actually took on, and apparently what we know is that advanced electronic warfare was used. This was jamming was done, hacked voice communications of Indian Rafales. And then he talked about what is now known as the multi-dimensional air war, where the data link between land, sea, air, and of course the satellite above space was all synchronized into one. And that's how PF somehow created this, what we call the kill zone. In that, we could talk about weapons which were used, which is of course PL-15. But what very important aspect the American audience needs to understand when they see the Chinese, of course, is that Chinese give out PL-15, for example, give out the same inventory. Apparently, it was reported that the PL-15E was used. So PL-15E actually hits onto about 145 kilometers, and that's what the Indians didn't know. The MiGs were actually as far as 190, 200 kilometers, and they were shot apparently, and I call this, they were sniped, if I could say this, from a long distance BVR, and they didn't know what's coming. Another aspect, of course, is that the Chinese, to all the weapons, from the aircraft to the missiles which were used, apparently the Chinese have given Pakistani source codes with that, which actually shows the strategic alliances and this communication between PLF and the PF. For example, so we had the source codes in Pakistan. So we've actually, and there was, not to forget, AVOX, which was actually redirecting and giving out, even at times, using, source code to access PL-15 missiles during mid-air. PL-15 is an amazing missile. It has two propeller rockets, of course. It goes up to Mach 5 speeds, and it hit the target precisely. And it was a question in that briefing that, are Rafales bad or J-10s, better than them? And the Air Force response from Pakistani side, the Rafales are actually great planes, but apparently it's the training which matters. In that capacity, I think the Indians were taken. They didn't know what was coming. Apparently, I think the Pakistanis didn't know what was coming, because it's the first time, J-10 was actually used in a battle-ready situation. And apparently the results came out. I think anyone who would be more happy would be the Chinese, not the Indians and Pakistanis. They won the war.
That's the bumper sticker takeaway. So as you've outlined very deftly there, Ali, this comes down to, it doesn't matter what it says on paper, because on paper, the tail of the tape is basically J-10 armed with PL-15 versus Rafale armed with Meteor. So on paper, the Rafale with Meteor should be able to outstick the J-10 with the PL-15. And as you've said, you're flying around, and the Air Marshal was talking about ratcheting, grinders, which is, you're on these racetracks, and your radar, you want to be alternating with other elements, other divisions. So somebody's looking downrange at all times. You get a radar sort, you get a valid hot trigger logic on your radar picture, Fox 3, op away. So if I'm on the Indian side, as you said, I'm looking at, okay, we're hanging out at 120, 130 miles. We're outside of max range for what we think the PL-15's RMAX is. And suddenly your wingman explodes. You're like, what? Right? And so all of the intel briefs, all of what you thought to be true goes out the window.
And I'll tell you this, and this is exclusively for you, is that the Pakistani Air Force with JF-17 Thunder use what we call the CM-400 missiles, which is hypersonic, and that was used to hit S-400 air defense systems. What we know now is that obviously we'll talk. This all be this can be verified, of course, in terms and be verified. The Pakistanis claimed that they did after when they sent out the drones and swarming missions. Actually, the GF-17 came close to the border and hit out these two missiles, which is CM 400, and it actually hit two batteries in what we know Udaipur base, which was stationed. Two of the Indian batteries of S-400 were hit, and that is unprecedented. What we know now is that the Indians obviously would say, is not, they've not denied or they've not accepted it, but what we know now is that the S-400 operators funerals were held, in one in Bihar and one in Indian side of Punjab, and that we know according to the families is that they operated S-400 air defense system for the Indians. So if you look at this war, apparently this was actually used by the Chinese to try out new weapons. And apparently what we know, and I was speaking to counterparts in China, and they're extremely happy. And I told them, you should give Pakistani some commission, because this is your deep seek moment 2.0, because the world got to know J10s and everything. And because of this, apparently a lot of there's this new, and I've been watching what your channel, and you've been talking about how Chinese have been developing weapons which are better than the Americans. And what the Chinese told me and was today, that the best weapons are not to be used, and that be used as deterrents. So even the J10s retired it's about 10 years old. It's actually a retired inventory from the Chinese or People's Air Force.
So, as you say, Ali, I've covered the Chinese developments, particularly the Fujian aircraft carriers, their sixth gen J-36, their hypersonic missiles, which are of great concern to the carrier strike groups, American carrier strike groups. But to your point, nowhere in there have I ever said it's superior to American technology.
Okay.
Which is the eye opener, right? This is the point. This is what my good friend Admiral Paparo, who is Indo-PACOM, who's been on the channel last year, the 4-star in charge of that area of responsibility, said quantity is a quality all its own, right? So what we know is, because they're not burdened by Congress or whatever in terms of the procurement system, the Chinese can procure things quicker than the U.S. military. That's part A. Their industrial base seems to be more robust than the current American, particularly on the shipbuilding and weapons development front. So that's the point. But this is what we're saying with this May 7th air war, not a dogfight. I know Newsweek and other outlets have called it a dogfight. I know that's a cool word to use in just sort of general public conversation, but it was not a dogfight. It was a BVR war, as the Air Marshal said, a very modern 21st century skirmish, the first of its kind. And the tail of the tape is, as we said, Chinese hardware superior to Russian/NATO/French hardware. And so this gets into maybe the aha moment for those who weren't paying attention, which is China and Pakistan have developed a alliance in terms of military suppliers and so forth that maybe people didn't notice, but this isn't new and it's ongoing.
And I was just speaking to somebody that from the Indian side, and they said, that we are not afraid of fighting with the Chinese because they don't know how to use the Chinese weapons, or they don't have the battle experience. But apparently Pakistanis have, so they'll be using Chinese weapons better than the Chinese. So I think it's true as well, and it's actually what has happened in this war is disrupted the supply chain globally. So if you see, Colombia recently is close to ordering J10s. Indonesia is actually, there's a debate going on in Indonesia, which was supposed to buy $8.4 billion worth of Rafales. There's been ongoing debate to cancel that deal. A lot of other Middle Eastern countries I know are actually cautiously looking and just paused their procurement. So it's a deeply embarrassing moment for France, to be honest, and of course for Indians as to what has happened. But this is not it. This is obviously was part of one part of the war. There were drones used and air defense systems was used. So this 3-day war. God forbid it could have been a nuclear moment for both countries, but it didn't happen. But we came very close to it.
Well, let's pull up to, let's say, 40,000 feet and talk about first, what was the event that triggered this particular 3-day war?
So if you look at British, they apparently anywhere they've ruled, they've actually, when they left, they've created an issue. And Kashmir was big part of an issue where, Pakistan, India had a very bad history. So the Pakistan was made because it was decided by the British that, any Hindu majority area would be India and Muslim majority area would be Pakistan. Kashmir was a Muslim majority state, but apparently their Maharaja was a Hindu, and apparently he opted to go with India, and where Pakistanis had this claim this was a Muslim majority area. And then, so we went into a war very early in 1948 with India. Then in 1965, 71, we came close to a war in 84, 86, and 99 and 2019, where you've actually if you remember, the Indians strike deep inside Pakistan, and apparently, again, Pakistani Air Force shot two of the warplanes, and we actually the Pakistanis caught Indian pilot Abhinandan, which was actually freed later, and apparently this. So there's a lot which has happened, and this came to a point where in Kashmir, 26 Hindu tourists were brutally murdered by Islamists. They call themselves the Kashmir Resistance Front. Nobody knew about where did they came from. The Pakistanis denied it. India, said it was the Pakistanis, and preemptively India came through using Rafales, again BVRs. They've used, and for the first time, they sent supersonic missiles, hit Lashkar-e-Taiba and headquarters and Jaish-e-Mohammed, two jihadi organizations which apparently were banned in Pakistan. So these buildings were hit, and apparently before that, India stopped Pakistan's water because Kashmir is the is where the water flow. And this escalated things. So unprecedented. India actually on a terrorist incident attacked Pakistan. The Pakistanis apparently on the night of 9 and 10th hit out what we now know is 6+1 airplanes. Then the Indians sent out drones in the morning, and there was a scare in Pakistan. They sent out around 24, 26 Israeli made Harpoon drones, which was kamikaze drones, to primarily check out Pakistani air defense systems. And the air defense systems in Pakistan were clever enough not to go for a hard kill, but they used anti-aircraft guns to kill those. So it was soft kills normally. Then the Pakistanis sent about good something like 2,400 drones in swarms, schematic warfare, to India to check penetrate into their airspace. The Indians then hit next day to a Noor Khan or 3 or 4 airbase through cruise missiles, BrahMos, and Pakistan retaliated with their missile, which actually shocked Indians. What we know, and according to President Trump, it was the Indians who called them for a ceasefire. It actually came close to a nuclear war, according to President Trump. He had to talk to the Pakistani side and Indian side, and this is how this 3 or 4 very interesting and dangerous war came to an end.
The Chinese are also laying claim to helping broker the ceasefire. So what is China's interest in Pakistan?
So Chinese think of Pakistan as its, extension of Chinese interest. It's, as I said, China thinks Pakistan is China is Israel. So the same, and of course, one of its reasons is, of course, they've invested $70 billion in what we now know as CPAC, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of the Road and Belt Initiative, which the Chinese took. So in terms, the whole idea for them is Pakistan being strategic, is Pakistan's location, of course, is that if somehow India with Americans or somebody have a naval blockade of South China Sea, or comes to a war, they would have a Pakistan through Middle East as a supply line to put their um, oil or exports. I would say it wouldn't disrupt them. So they made this huge roads and trains and stations from Pakistan, starting from south, which is connects to China. So Pakistan is that. Is a strategic partner for Chinese for economic reasons and for other defense reasons. And just to give you a point, 81% of Pakistan's procurement is defense procurement is from China. So that's so an over reliance, because traditionally Pakistan's always bought American or Western hardware. We have F-16s, and F-16s were not used here because if something would have happened to the F-16s, the Americans have actually given F-16s to Pakistan, not to be used against India, but for counter-terrorism efforts.
So overall, this has really shaken up the international arms market, as it were. As you said, there's other countries, Colombia, I think Egypt, that are now sort of going, hey, maybe we want J-10s, maybe we want Chinese airplanes and missiles versus even American weapons.
It's not just the superior weapon, it's value for money which China is giving, right? So they're selling J-10s for something like 30 to $50 million a piece, right? As compared to Rafales, which is about 150 at times, $200 million or more at times. At the same time, Pakistan just brokered a deal just yesterday night with the Chinese, where the Chinese are giving out J-35s, 40 J-35s to Pakistan, which is a fifth generation stealth fighter plane that is coming. And if you can gauge the Chinese seriousness from a part that the J-35 was supposed to be given to the Chinese Air Force. They are actually diverting their own planes to Pakistan. So that is what the Chinese are doing in this region. So they found a perfect partner.
So, Ali, thank you for joining us from Islamabad with your deep intel, no lie deep intel. Keep your phone on, and we'll look forward to having you on the channel again very soon.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. And as a reminder, my latest novel, the fourth in the Punk series, just hit the streets, Punk's Force. And if you go to usni.org/press/books and put Punk's Force in the search box, and then at checkout, enter Punk 40, that's PUNK 40. At checkout, you'll get 40% off. So check it out and let me know what you think of the book after you read it. Thank you.